Hi, everybody. This is Kara with Senior and Disability Services. And hi, let me adjust my view here. You're here in the right place if you're looking for our new DayHab regulations. And we had quite a few people sign up for this particular webinar. So we're going to give folks a chance to go ahead and join in. Just take a few minutes here. I'll introduce us to how to get the best out of our webinar. I see a lot of us are joining in, and in order to get the best out of your webinar, what you want to do is make sure that you know the controls that are on the screen. So you'll see on the screen probably a couple of icons. One of them looks like a little hand, and it should be in a circle. So just so I know that you can see me and hear me, if you want to go ahead and hit that little hand and give me a high five this afternoon, that would be great. And I'm looking on my screen, it sounds weird, but there's all kinds of little glyphs that go on here so I can see that you're raising your hand. So go ahead and raise your hand if you haven't already. Let me know that you're here and that you can see me and hear me. All right, I'll go ahead and lower the hand. No worries. If you want to practice raising them, that's okay. Today's webinar, you're entered in a muted status, so that means that you'll be able to hear me, but you won't be able to hear other participants. So you'll need to participate by chat. So if you could go ahead and find the question area, there should be probably an icon or at least a label that says questions or maybe chat. If you could go ahead and just type in there if you want to type hello or sign in for me if you want, or just tell me how the weather is, that would be fine too. Any of those things. Go ahead and practice using the question area. Hi. Okay, awesome. Hey, everybody. Yes, the coffee looks good. I always like to bring coffee to a meeting, so it's a virtual meeting, so here's my coffee. I hope you all have had some great coffee today if you're a coffee drinker, tea drinker, whatever. And it's really cold in Wasilla. Thank you. Yep. Didn't see how to raise the hand. That's okay. You can see us. All right. Awesome. Okay. Um, thank you for signing in and saying hello and practicing using the controls. Just a couple of reminders about connectivity. If your internet connection breaks, then you can, once you get internet connection again, you can just go back to your original email and you can come back in using that email link that you got originally. Same thing happens here. If I disappear or staff, our SDS staff disappears, we'll have to wait till we get internet connection, then we'll just come right back in. So that hasn't really ever happened. What has happened is we've had degraded audio and perhaps a video over the experience of doing these webinars. So sometimes we turn off our camera so that it's easier to save the bandwidth that way. So I'll probably do that once I get started here and come back, and say hello again at Q&A or something like that. But anyway, we're glad you're here to learn about new DayHab regulations, and I'll go ahead and get started. Okay, another thing to know is that I did put in our handout section, you probably see an icon or something that says handouts. I put 2 files in there, and it may be that you can download the files there. If you go ahead and try, you see probably 2 PDF files open. If you don't see them and you don't see downloads, don't worry, because sometimes our devices don't actually read those. For example, some of the tablets and phones, they're not able to see PDFs, and that's perfectly fine because we can email you a copy of the materials when we're done here at some point later on today. We're also hoping to post a video to our YouTube channel and to create an FAQ to help everybody learn more about this information. All right, so I obviously am still working from a remote location, I have one screen to work with. So sometimes I sort of talk to myself while I shuffle things around in order to present and understand it all on my screen here. Okay, so day habilitation regs, I'm displaying the number of the reg and basically 3 things that we'll talk about today. How to find day habilitation regulations, and I'll take us out on the web to quickly explain that. And talk about how they came to be a little bit and when they're effective, when they were effective, and when they'll be implemented. We will review a plain language version of the regulations, which is what we're showing in the PowerPoint. I did put a copy of the presentation and a kind of a plain black and white simple text document in your handouts there. So you don't have to print out the whole, if you want to print anything out, you don't have to print out the whole color presentation with all the ink and things like that. So same information, just on plain text, and then we'll have time for questions. Okay, so what I'd like to do right now is I'd like to go talk about how to find day habilitation regulations, and we'll take a look at we call the signed regulations. They're in the register. Okay, so they're in our register regulations. We'll show you an easy way to find them now. So I'm going to freeze my screen, and I'm going to pick up a link to our web page, which looks like this. And I'm just using the Senior and Disability Services web page to go by here. Hang on, there. Simpler that way. I'm just trying to grab things and move them around so I can see them better and scroll. Okay, so this is our main web page, and folks really do know how to find that. I'm just assuming that you know how to find that. So if you scroll down on the right, you'll see where it says of interest. There's lots of information here. One of the things that is here is SDS regulations and related materials. This is a very handy page that helps you find regulations and conditions of participation. Some of them are documents and some of them are links. But for today, we're looking at a home and community-based waiver service. And this is a handy tip that instead of scrolling through all of these, you could choose this index table of contents. It just says TOC, table of contents, and click on that. And this is a handy way to see how, it's a handy way to get the long list and click just on what you want, okay? So I'm going to scroll down until I see day habilitation. And you'll see the actual services more towards the end of the list, sort of. Okay, so here's day habilitation right here. All right, so we can click on that. And that is how we find our day habilitation regs. And these are the current ones that we're teaching to today, posted in the register. Okay. So day habilitation services we put it in plain language in our PowerPoint. But it's important to know a couple of things before we look at that. The rest of that is the new regulations were effective October 1st. And the important thing about that is because we were still within the time of COVID. Because of that, they will not be implemented until the 1st of January 2021. So what that means is if a person has a plan that renews after that date, they're going to have and they request DAHAB. Their request for DAHAB will be evaluated using these regulations. Previous requests for DAHAB were evaluated using the previous reg set. And then, of course, because of COVID, we had extensions of services because of the COVID situation. So basically, if you have a current support plan, whether it was done on the care coordinator could use a shortened form for plans that didn't have any changes. So if you had if you have a current support plan, no matter what form it was done on, um, and it has DAHAB on it, the new regs will come into play upon your renewal as long as it occurs after January 1st. Okay, so January 1st is the day that we'll evaluate that. So the other thing that's interesting about these regulations is that everything is a story, part of a bigger story when it comes to the regulation process. Something to know about that is when new regulations are proposed, they have a period of time during which, well, they have a reason to be proposed, first of all, and then they have a period of time where they get evaluated and there's public comment by stakeholders, or any Alaskan citizen with a say in the matter would be welcome to comment. And then the regs are adopted and they become effective. So the interesting thing about these regs is that through our proposal and comment and adoption period, we found that our Alaskan citizens and stakeholders wanted to have more specific definitions of DAHAB. And so it's easier to understand what DAHAB is for with these new regulations. And it's very informative. Our last webinar, a lot of people had a lot of questions. And so we're hoping that this makes it more clear that this is a wonderful service, a very important service, and is intended to create outcomes around the purpose of DAHAB. Okay. So anyway, before I go here, this presentation is assuming that DAHAB is done outside the home, notwithstanding the Appendix K allowances. So I know that we're still having services done in locations, DAHAB done in locations such as in residences, which is not what the regulation allows here, but Appendix K allows it, okay? So what we're talking about here is, standard understanding of the regs without exceptions like that. And to offer you a framework through which evaluating how the regs are awarded and evaluating people's need for habilitation rather than where it occurs. Okay, so this is not really about the Appendix K part. This is just about kind of throwing it way back to the basics of what is DAHAB for, and what would somebody do with their day when they had DAHAB, and how somebody would work on goals and how to make that evident in a proposed support plan so that SDS can make a very informed evaluation of need and of level of service that is awarded. Okay. So with all that being said, I would like to know from you, what's one question that you would like answered today? What's one thing that you don't want to leave this presentation without having answered? And I will see if I can do that. Sometimes I'm able to answer them and sometimes I'm not. I may have to get back to you or get back to everybody with part of our FAQ. So what is one question that you would like answered today? I'll go ahead and read them out as you put them in. So I just want to go back on camera for a second and let you know I'm still here in person. Okay, thank you. You're sending in some great questions. This one says, how is this different from what we have been doing last year? Looking for clarity on what is needed to ask for more than 12 hours per week. For a person that requires more than an average of 12 hours per week, would a letter from a medical professional meet SDS's needs for documentation? What is the difference from previous to new? Gotcha on that. How do the regulations relate to Appendix K flexibilities? Been discussing changes with reviewer. I'm concerned how to make sure still person directed within the new regulation and the client still has the choice to work on what they want to in a way that is meaningful to them, yet checks all the boxes for approval. Great questions. And is an amendment required for group day hab if current plan has individual approved? I can answer that one right away. The answer is yes. What's needed to get more than 12 hours? Okay. Well, hopefully these regs will help to work that out. Will help to explain that. What's an appropriate way to recognize seasonal utilization of day hab? Will these regs make it easier for those who need more day hab hours to get them? I think they make it easier to explain the need. You know, the chain of explaining to getting is custom, if you will. It's an evaluation process. But I think that these regulations explain pretty well what the requirements are to, to portray need for that. And the difference from the previous to the new is not a whole lot, except for more clear definitions. And this is what was asked for, if you will, through the regulatory process of proposal or public feedback, proposal, public feedback, and adoption. A lot of the pieces that you'll see here are part of some really good interactions with that we've had with the provider community. All right, so I'm going to kind of file these in my mind in themes. I hear about the difference part. Over 12 hours a week. There was a question here about would a letter from a medical professional meet the needs? So it can be part of the document set, but it wouldn't be in and of itself the only document. Okay, so you can always submit a document that has relevance to the person's needs and helps to portray that story. But the one document of a medical professional's letter or a therapist wouldn't be in and of itself enough to show that. Okay, how do the regulations relate to Appendix K flexibilities? They are they're in effect starting January 1, 2021. So like I said before, if a person has a plan that is renewing after that, then whatever they have now stays in place and Appendix K flexibilities are still there. And then upon their renewal, they would be reviewed under the new regulations. So it affects the day hab in terms of where the location is and who does the service. Under Appendix K, there are certain flexibilities, but it doesn't literally change a whole lot under those. Okay. And then some of the questions I would think of as more about person-centered, working on goals that are relevant to the person. What's an appropriate way to recognize seasonal utilization? Best thought there is that we really need to paint that portrait in the plan. So for example, I guess this is a common example, like a young person who's in school. They might need additional day hab to happen in the summer when there isn't school. Now, I remember this is without COVID things at the moment, okay? I'm just trying to answer that question. The plan could request a different weekly average than the weekly average that we just kind of throw out there because it's, the maximum divided by 12. We'll talk about those thoughts too. Stated maximums and how to paint the picture in a plan, but the plan would simply tell what the weekly average would be for the different times in life that you would need it. But it couldn't go over in a year. It couldn't go over. Okay. Again, one thing I want to emphasize, and I'll say it again, is that when we talk about maximums and regulation, and a lot of questions are about that here, It's important to take that into account, but to understand that not everybody will need the maximum. We really have to tell the story in the person's plan. So we need to take that into regard when we're requesting it. So it's not the case that every single person will ask for 624 or 624 and then some. That is not every person's situation. I mean, at the end of the day, all of our Medicaid services are functioning and awarded under the totality of the person's picture. That means that the services are, of course, limited to the definition of the service, meaning I wouldn't request day habilitation for non-day habilitation related goals, and they are limited under the non-duplication. So if the person has other services or other supports, and I want to say non-duplication regardless of funding source. So if the person has other services or supports, then it wouldn't be the case that they may request all the way up to 624. Okay, so that's important. We do ask for a weekly average to be put in the plan, but one could write a plan with a different weekly average throughout the year. Like for 6 months, there's this weekly average, and then for 3 months, there's this one. It can't go over, or it wouldn't go over. And if it did, it would follow these regs to propose the request for going over. And we'll take a look at that. All right. So I am going to go ahead and go to the next concept here. That being said, with all of the questions that we're talking about, which are wonderful questions, do you know someone who's had a great outcome from DayHab? Could you tell us their story? Tell me their story in a few sentences. Think about someone you know who has used DayHab, and is there a great story, a positive outcome that somebody achieved, somebody that you've helped achieve maybe, or maybe just somebody you know? We had some great stories yesterday, or not yesterday, last last webinar. People getting driver's licenses, things like that. What are some successes that you can talk about here in a few sentences, and I'll just share them with us. Again, if you want to write something that you don't want shared or responded to, you can, of course, always put, please don't share. You can just write it and say, don't share it. Any success stories out there with day habilitation? I'll give you a minute or so. I'll be quiet here while you take some time to tell a few of those stories for us. Okay. First one says friendships being made in group DayHab and continued outside of paid services. Yes, that's a great outcome for day habilitation. Really wonderful, and helps the people that who we serve get involved in the community for friendships and to help to develop social capital, which is where I have an identity, I have interests, I have things I share with others. I do need supports, but I have a lot to share with other people. I have friends, I go different places. Again, non-COVID talk here, but I have interests and I study things. I'm doing involvement in my community, and people see me do that and become part of a larger group, if you will. And my isolation is reduced, and I get to go towards my goals, and I get to increase my communication skills, or whatever it is that our goals are, through the service. Okay, some other great stories. DayHab has given one of my clients more confidence to meet people, and now with DayHab, she's going to be doing DVR so she can do supported employment. That's a wonderful outcome. Alaska is an employment first state, so we do have to honor that. We we do, of course, help people with their goals with DayHab and a lot of them around the social abilities and around communication, which is always helpful for work, always, always, no matter what job. So it's pretty great. I have a client who does her best work in the community. She struggles being at home due to lack of resources and distractions from others. She looks at her community time as her job. Interesting and very cool. The, as adults, a lot of times we consider our job as our identity in a way, like, what do you do for work? Well, so that's also part of what we want to help individuals we serve achieve. And our day habilitation could be part of that. And if a person wants to pursue a job, of course, there's supported employment there to help the person do that. One of our staff and clients went and shoveled driveways last week for the elderly, for elders. What a great way to give back during the pandemic. I love that. Thank you. A lovely lady with more than 12 hours per week that, due to the teaching and community access, was able to transition from requiring around the clock one-to-one to being able to live in an assisted living home with additional natural supports on the weekend. Very cool outcome. And I'm sure that was her desired outcome, one of them probably. Um, Young person learned how to use figurative language, strengthening their friendships and lessened their depression. And there are very cool providers out there. Absolutely. I always love to give a shout out to our one-to-one staff or our direct service providers in helping people work towards their goals and just actually really implementing the service as, encountering the person and helping to bring this forth in their life. So very exciting to hear these. One person was able to become their own Social Security payee and manage their finances, having the pride in controlling their money. Well, how cool is that? That's awesome. Anything that helps, that's truly an independence there, independent skill. I've had clients call in and cancel DayHab due to having friends and other things to do. They don't have as much time for services anymore. I know it sounds weird, but that's the way, I mean, the point that I'm going to get to here, and I'm sure if you've been in trainings with me before, you've heard me say, the point of services is to help the person get a life. The point of services is not to get services necessarily, although you need them. Okay. I'm not saying people don't need them, but above and beyond that, it's to get a life, right? And services can help with that. Absolutely. An individual is able to show his art that he created in DayHab and services in a New York City art gallery. Wow. Very cool. I love that. Someone who loves the outdoors has been out fishing, horseback riding, target shooting, all part of his culture and greatest joy in his life. Helping people find their joy and manifest that is also another, human need that our services can open the door to that and help the person get that life or pieces of that life if there's not, I may have limitations as everybody does, to doing everything that's on my list of what I would like to do. But we can definitely do more with these supports, and person-centered supports are wonderful. I've seen folks learn how to use their self-advocacy skills that they did not know they had, learning to vote and etc. DayHab has supported teaching and positive outcomes in identifying people and places in the community who are safe. I love the voting one, very important of our civic engagement and hearing people's voice in our in government, towards our government. And then teaching about safe places in the community and identifying people, absolutely. Okay, here's a cool story. Miss Diva has developed a natural network of support. That's not the real name, by the way. where others like hairstylists, adapted recreation specialists, personal trainers are comfortable assisting as this person as mainstream as possible, and they can feel comfortable providing personal services and can understand her communication. Emotional and physical health as a result of DAHAB has kept her out of the hospital for 4 years, more than 4 years. And people building confidence to do things apart from their parents, and young people, or maybe even not so young people, getting out on their own and being able to connect with others and do things like bowling, library, and crafts that their natural supports may not be able to accommodate. Um, exploring their ability to tolerate things like sound sensitivity and going bowling, and the parents never even thought she would like that. So very cool. Working on socialization and communication and getting your needs met through appropriate channel. So a person was able to move out of their parents' home after many years of having that as a goal, moving to a group home, becoming a peer advocate and a client representative on a government group. Very cool. And DAHAB providing skills and physical activities like Special Olympics and scouting that people would otherwise not be a part of. So these are wonderful stories, and thank you so very much for sharing them. I'm going to go ahead and save my bandwidth here. Hang on just one sec. I really appreciate that, and I'm going to keep my questions open here so I can kind of go back to different ones. But it's always important to kind of step back and see what DAHAB has done for people, and how, and more importantly, how people have utilized DAHAB to create gains in their lives, with assistance, of course. So into our regulation, Dehabilitation is our regulation place where it sits as stated here. We're summarizing here. The DAHAB format is that it's outside of the person's home. Okay, once again, not talking about COVID times. It's allowed in the home right now, so don't worry about that. If it's allowed in the home because of COVID and continues to be, then it would be. All right, could be one-to-one or in a group. It includes round-trip transportation from home to the DAHAB setting, unless it says differently in the support plan. So a few words about this part is that it does include the transportation. However, DAHAB itself is not transportation alone, okay? It's possible to work on certain goals during the transportation part, but we wouldn't request dehabilitation solely for the transportation piece. And if it says differently in the plan, it's where the person has another way to get to and from. Maybe a family member would bring the person and pick them up or something like that. So that's not very different than how it was in the past reg set. I do get questions about group home and DAHAB, who transports if the person has group home and DAHAB. A group home has transportation within its services, and you can see that within our habilitation conditions of participation. So I get a lot of questions. Hey, Kara, which one does it? So my best answer there is whatever's best for the person. If it's the group home transporting or if it's the DAHAB agency transporting, whatever's good for the person, whatever works best for them. So that's, and that could be depicted in a plan too, a support plan. So a care coordinator could have a conversation about how that happens ahead and just put that in the plan so folks know they have something to go by. DAHAB offers, and here's where there's a little bit of a difference because it's talking more specifically about what DAHAB does for a person, the work it does. It offers active teaching that helps the person learn, practice, or get better at skills for living independently or being active in the community. So the skill focus areas are self-help, socialization, or adaptation. So those are skill areas that dehabilitation can, help support a person in either keeping skills, getting new skills, or improving skills they already have. So you usually see these requested around self-help, socialization, adaptation. It offers skill development for practicing or reinforcing things that may be learned in school or therapy or other settings. It can also help to slow down a condition where the person has can the person's condition could degenerate. So if it can help to slow down that condition, DAHAB could do that too. So school or therapy, DAHAB in and of itself is not school or therapy. So DAHAB isn't used to support during school. School supports during school. That would be considered duplicative. It is also not therapy in and of itself. However, either one of those services that aren't DAHAB could inform goals that are pursued through DAHAB, if that makes sense for the person. So it can kind of make a continuum there of what a person is working on, but the staff wouldn't be literally delivering therapy or school. They would be just practicing things that are done in those settings. Again, within Medicaid, we have non-duplication. It's everywhere, everything that Medicaid does. It does not duplicate, replace, or improve or supplement. Now, this is personal care services, community first choice services, or other home and community-based services. It doesn't duplicate IDEA, which is school, and it doesn't duplicate services in the Rehabilitation Act, which would be Division of Vocational Rehabilitation. Okay, it can support outside of those things or in other ways where a person may have already gotten supports from them, and then they're continuing on with their life, growing based on what they learned, but doesn't replace it. DAHAB is not for companionship, supervision, replacing activities and opportunities from natural supports. So we wouldn't tell a person, you can't hang out with friends because DAHAB has to come and do that. Of course, that sounds odd, but that wouldn't be part of what we do. Companionship is a person could be certainly friendly with the person who's serving them, but it's not simply just companionship. It's goal-based teaching and training, and it's not just supervision where it's like, well, I'm going to hang out over here and watch you and make sure you're okay, and not actually working with that person to pursue goals. Okay, so a lot of times I get the question, hey, Kara, isn't DAHAB to get a person into the community? Without Dehabilitation, they really wouldn't be able to get into the community. That's what it does for them. And so, yes, Dehabilitation does get people into the community, but it isn't requested for that purpose. It is requested for what goal is the person going to be working on? What skills are the person going to be working on in the community? Okay, so even if the community is at home right now because of COVID, that's okay. What skills will the person be working on in the community as opposed to just, Kara will have DAHAB to take her out someplace into the community because she likes to drink coffee. That's great, but what am I going to work on when I get there? Am I going to work on ordering all the different complicated coffee drinks that I might like? Or what else is it? So people have the ability and the right to be citizens of their community and not dependent on services to literally bring them to the community. But what will they be working on in the community, when they're there with this service? DAHAB provides a person active training and teaching based on goals which are meaningful to the person and outcome based. And I know we had a question at the beginning about, will this reg set have wording that helps reinforce a person doing things they want to do? Okay, so this is where you might see that. And again, like in the beginning, I stated the regulations have more definition around what it is, and what it would do for somebody. So meaningful, of course, it has meaning to the person. Outcome-based means that a person would achieve something like one of the stories you told, okay? Some of the stories that came in after I moved on were, there's a short one here, 2 people who got their first moose harvested. Pretty cool. That's an outcome. They have providing skills and physical activities. Maybe there's a physical goal that was an outcome in there. A lot of our stories were about, a person who loved bowling, even though they were sound sensitive, they ended up really enjoying bowling. And so they found a new activity that they liked, and that was an outcome for that person, as opposed to, I guess, endless practicing with not ever really achieving an outcome. We would have to modify, if that was going on for me, I'd have to modify my support, the interventions, so that it would help me get closer, or maybe change the interventions a little bit so it works a little better for me. Find out what's meaningful to me, perhaps. So I'm hoping this is helping to paint the picture of how the regs have more specific definitions within them. So now I'm going to talk about amounts, and I don't want us to get confused. So I'll try to take a stab at it here. Okay, shoot me your questions as we go. Love to get your questions. So we request day habilitation like all services based on the need. So our regulations depict maximums. That's because they're regulations. They're not support plans. They're not, something that I would literally take and build a plan on. I would build a plan on my own needs. Okay, so if a regulation says there's a maximum of a certain amount of service, that's not the expectation for every person to request that total amount in every case. Okay. When there's a weekly average depicted, for example, in our support plan, we ask for day habilitation in a weekly average, right? A minimum weekly average. So 624 comes out to 12 hours a week if you just divide it throughout the year. That does not mean that a person has to have 12 hours a week of day hab. They can have a different amount, and it could be shown in the plan how that, and sometimes of the year it might be different than 12, and sometimes it may not be, but it wouldn't go over without meeting the conditions for going over, which we didn't even get to, but we're going to get there in just a second. Okay, so because it has a maximum, the assumption is not that every person gets 12 hours, you get 12 hours and you get 12 hours. That's not what it is. People are going to be coming first in our discussion here. Medicaid is a fee for service. So when we see regulations and cost sheets that show totals, and they attach these to unit amounts and things like that, it's just natural to look at that as the worth of the waiver, like the total, like the sum total. So I'm asking to shift our mind from that to what works for the person, and let's focus on the quality of the service being provided and the amount to make it match what the person needs, so it can be delivered meaningfully with an outcome to that person. It's different. A fee for service is different than looking at the total and saying, well, this much is set aside for that person, because that's not really the case. It's not like it's set aside. It's, and of course, in budget land, where bigger stories about conglomerate budget is told, then what we usually use, or what any state would use, would be reports from previous years. And guess what that is? That is fee for service. So it's service that happened and was reimbursed for and properly documented and met all the needs of the of the person and was in an approved plan for a Medicaid recipient and was current and all those things. So it's probably best to think about it in terms of a fee for service and to focus on the quality of the service and to make sure that the quantity matches. So what it says here is 7 AAC 130, 260C, the maximum of 624 hours each year. The amount is the total of all types of DAHAB, meaning group or individual, between and amongst providers. So if I had more than one provider of Dehabilitation, then it wouldn't, the maximum would be the same, okay? You know, I'm not asking us to focus on maximum in any way. I'm really asking us to focus on the needs of the person and how we can accomplish the teaching and training that we just spent so much time looking at, okay? So, by the way, a plug, if you are a habilitation service provider and you have questions about providing services, you have questions about how to document them or how to work with the team to establish meaningful, well, the person establishes meaningful goals, but to establish workable interventions and step-by-step objectives or task analysis or any of those things, we would love to welcome you to our Habilitation Services webinar for our HAB service providers. We offer it at least once a month, sometimes a couple of times a month, and it's a pretty easy, fun training, and we'd love to see you there if you haven't come. If you haven't come to it before, you can check our training calendar for that. So we can delve into documentation and things like that in that setting. And I might be able to hit high points here, answer questions about it here, but we have something else that you can go to is what I'm trying to say. We have more, but wait, there's more. Okay, so more than 624 hours of Dehabilitation, a person could request this. And I was talking about writing goals and objectives. Yes, yes. A provider could come to a separate training about that, is what I'm trying to say. We have a resource for that. Okay, so in terms of more, 624 hours of DAHAB could be requested when a person has a physical or behavioral condition that puts them at risk for going to a hospital, institution, or jail. And so when I try to put a little bit more of a shape around this, I say within 30 days, okay? So, but for the provision of this service, the person would need to enter the hospital, an institution, or jail within the next 30 days. And as a framework, that tells you the urgency of it or the level that it rises to, okay? It may not be the case for every single person's story, okay? So if you're feeling that a person and you're seeing evidence within a person's history and documentation and case notes and things like that, that they may need to apply for above the limit, then of course we always say in training you can apply, and there's nothing that's saying that you can't. I'm here to give you the shape that it needs to meet in order to get there. Okay. What are some questions? What are some examples of documentation that would be accepted for potential? We'll talk about that. Okay. So again, DAHAB provides a person interesting activities that fit the needs, abilities, and interests, and which are identified in a person-centered planning process. The planning process includes review of relevant assessments. And when I say assessments, it can be, of course, the assessment that SDS does, but there can be other documentation that's like an assessment. It could be school assessments. It could be other kinds of reports or psych evaluations or other kinds of evaluations that you would review in terms of planning out this service. So to request above the limit, people were asking about, what documentation is needed. The support plan and their records, which are assessments or medical records or other kinds of documentation, would need to show at least one of these situations. Acute or degenerative physical condition where the activities are needed to stay the same or improve, and these activities are only available in the community. So it's not something a person could do at home or only in a therapy office or something like that. It would be something that's available in the community. If a person displays behaviors that create a risk of physical harm to themselves or others, and they must practice safety skills needed in the community. Okay, there's a request here for links to our HAB provider training. We'll get you that, okay? Do I have staff attending here with me?
It's
I
in.
probably
I put
do.
it in.
Oh, hi. Sorry. Okay.
Sorry.
No,
I threw it in
I
there.
didn't open it up. Thank you. Didn't
Yeah.
open it enough to see. And that's Delight. So thank you, Delight.
Yeah.
Delight Mills, one of our training team members.
The next
We
training is this Thursday, December 10th from 1 to 4. Well, and it's open, it's part of the care coordinator trainings, but it's open to all providers because we focus in-depthly on, who does what in this process and how do we do it, like as a team, right? The person, the care coordinator, and the HAB provider.
Okay. Thank you. And also we have Cassandra Lynch joining us today, another member of our training team. So if you see answers from Cassandra, thank you, Cassandra. Thank you, Delight. Awesome. Okay. So I was talking about situations to consider requesting above the limit of day habilitation. Okay. So let's go to the next slide. Reiterating behaviors that create a risk of physical harm to themselves or others as safety skills that need to be practiced in the community. Or a person could be having transition from one-to-one support, such as acuity services. So they have, for example, 24-hour one-to-one support through acuity, and they must learn skills for successful living in the community. So those are the shapes that should be, that those are what you should look around, look towards for defining how that person needs over the limit of day habilitation. Okay, and it'll be summarized again here in just a bit. The person would be having another factor is transition from hospitalization or jail within the current or last support plan time frame. So if they have this and they are needing day hab because they have skills, they must learn skills to live in the community successfully. If they had been discharged from hospitalization or jail within the current or last support plan time frame, that would be another part. Of course, we would need documentation as stated in the beginning of this part, assessments reviewed, notes reviewed, things like that, that would show, okay? Okay, so talking about that, there would be medical, social, educational, or other records that show their need for day hab above the maximum. And what would that be? What kind of documentation would that be? It could be current and last year's assessments for waiver services. Could be current and last year's support plan. Could have shown that it could show that need. Clinical records from providers, medical providers or therapy providers. And it also could be direct service case notes. So all those things are things that can tell that story. Those are all documents that can tell that story of need. Question says they cannot be on acuity services and have day hab, correct? That is correct. A person wouldn't have the acuity services, acuity 24-hour service through the waiver. They cannot have any other service during the acuities. I mean, they can certainly engage in activities, but they'd already have staff and there wouldn't be separate billing to request reimbursement for any other service. You are correct. Okay, a support plan requesting more than the day hab cap must describe the situation, the physical or behavioral condition, and one or more of the situations identified. Situation or situations, acute or degenerative physical condition, behaviors that create a risk of physical harm to self or others, transition from one-to-one support acuity services, or transition from hospitalization or jail within the current year of or before the support plan year. So these are the situations, the contexts that are supported by documentation that are in place, one or more of those to request additional day hab above the cap. The request needs to identify goals, focusing on learning in the community and develop skills of self-help socialization and adaptation, and explain why additional time is needed to work on the goals in the community. The plan needs to list each intervention, and so intervention is the methods that the staff uses to help that person work on their objectives. Objectives are the shorter steps that a person takes to get to the goal. So they're going to work their objectives with the support of interventions. So the plan needs to talk about interventions, those that are previously tried and those that are currently in use. It needs to describe if they were successful or are successful, what is successful and what was unsuccessful, or what is unsuccessful at the present time. And just showing you I'm still here in person. It needs to answer how additional day hab services don't duplicate other services or replace other services, regardless of funding source, to include things a person can do for themselves. So this is what the proposed plan will have when it requests the support plan, when it requests additional day habilitation above the cap. And so the regulation also is more clear about definitions. So definitions, here it says critical need. So critical need is defined as the person's situation will lead to institutionalization or jail or hospitalization if more day hab is not approved. So for example, but for the service, the person would enter the institution, hospital, or jail. Limited amount means day hab that exceeds 624 in a plan year and SDS decides that the hourly basis is reasonable, will help the person, learn or train the person to help a physical or behavioral condition. Okay, so when it says limited amount, it's referring to approvals above the limit. And active teaching or training is that which uses evidence-based measures and interventions. It addresses the objective, meaning the step that it takes, the steps that a person would take, doesn't have to be just one, the step the person takes as described in their support plan, their approved support plan. It leads to a positive outcome. So there's evidence that we can see that the person is moving towards their goal, making an incremental progress. The active teaching or training is where the support worker engages with the person during each unit of service. So that means for each 15 minutes, the worker is engaged with that person. Okay. So evidence-based, we did get some questions about that at the last time and last webinar we had. Evidence-based is where there's a measurement involved where you can actually see progress, and it doesn't have any particular paradigm. There's a lot of research out there for evidence-based measures and interventions. So there isn't any one that is a required thing, of course, just that there is something that has that aspect to it. Evidence-based measures and interventions, data has taken that shows that this works and that this is likely something that the person needs and will, to the best of our entire planning team and the person, the representative's ability to understand what's going on, that this will work. This is the best idea for this person. This is the best support for this person. And then more definitions: habilitation, active teaching or training that, as we've stated a couple times, helps the person acquire, retain, or improve skills. And then it plans to reach a new personal level of function that would help that person. Okay, so there may be a continuum of improvement, but because of the evidence-based piece, we would all, a reasonable person who doesn't, a person who didn't know the person or didn't know the situation could look at the evidence and understand it without having to get any more information. Okay, it's all there and understandable by people about how that is going to improve. The person's going to improve. There may be increments, and that's okay. That's part of how we serve people. So there's a piece about residential habilitation here. Residential habilitation is where habilitative services provided in a residence, either in a person's own residence or in their out-of-home, which would be assisted living home, a group home, or family hab home in the case of our habilitative out-of-home residential. So a group home does have a piece of social and recreational opportunities in the community required. So a person wouldn't only rely on day habilitation to become a citizen of their community, become a member of their neighborhood or something like that, or pursue community activities with outcomes like what we're talking about. Some of that would happen through some of the res hab services, meaning our out-of-home residential. Okay. A risk of institutionalization means the person's current condition will probably require them to move to an acute care hospital, nursing facility, or ICF IDD facility within the plan year. So there were some questions there about, was talking about 30 days regarding, the when a person would possibly enter. So here you have within the plan year. Okay, so it's a guideline. So within the plan year. Okay. And then just as the end here, this is actually my last slide. The day habilitation conditions of participation got updated to January 8th, 2020. So there is a notation about that. So just that you're aware of that. Okay. So this is our entire presentation here about this new regulation set, questions and answer time is here. So I'm going to go ahead and go to the questions, and hopefully you've been able to understand a little bit more about the conditions that are needed to request above the limit of day habilitation. That again was the desire, the initial push towards having new regulations around day habilitation were about needing better definitions and better description of the conditions that would require requesting more because of possibly entering an institution, hospital, or jail. Okay. What are some examples of documentation that would be accepted for potential to enter hospital, institution, or jail? That was in one of our slides that stated the documentation required, right? I can go back to that if you want, but that would be assessments, school plans, case notes, medical documentation, and perhaps direct service notes. Within the support plan year is correct. You are correct. Within the support plan year, we saw that at the end. There's a comment here about if a person could accept or benefit from the frequency of that HAB service. And it kind of goes back, what if they were fragile, they had immune deficiencies or something like that? Would a person really be able to successfully engage in dehabilitation to the level that if we were requesting more than the limit, would the person, benefit from that? And would they be able to actually do that? Or would it actually not be good for their health? So of course, we wouldn't ask for services that, that would potentially make a person not healthy or be too taxing on that person. That wouldn't work out. So that's a good comment, a good thought. In a degenerative condition, isn't the goal to retain skills? If it's degenerative, there may not be improvement. So how will that be measured? Are adaptions considered improvements? Adaption is on the list of what the service does, helps the person adapt, and retaining skill is on the list too. So it's not necessarily asking for improvement of degenerative conditions because they're degenerative conditions, but to show how the service helped the person preserve their abilities and help the person adapt would be the purpose of the service for that person. Okay. Can I clarify the difference between habilitation and rehabilitation? Lots of people are getting rehabilitation, which from the last training, it is not what habilitation is about. Sure, I can. So rehabilitation is when a person gets probably the best way I could put it is some kind of therapy, teaching, training, maybe physical therapy to regain a skill that they used to have or regain use of a body part that they lost use of, that type of thing. Rehabilitation is really focused around those things. Habilitation is for individuals who experience intellectual developmental disability or one of the other qualifiers around the DD waiver. Some of them are physical in nature too, where a person needs to kind of be a lifelong learner for these things. They're not going to be regaining a skill that they lost necessarily with a shorter treatment plan by a person who's, a licensed therapist, that type of thing. Habilitation is just what the waiver is for, ongoing support because the person has a disability. They're not in a crisis mode or a health crisis. We know the person lives with a particular disability, and we are providing support ongoing throughout their plan year, expected to continue to need that support for the most part because of their disability. So, a person who has the waiver and has HAB services could potentially have rehab services if they have an injury or something like that and they lost a skill like that. But it's very, very different. So yeah, it's completely different. Definitely rehab is not a waiver service. So, but if you need that, then you should get that in your wherever the right provider is for you to get that. Rehabilitative services also occur in mental health. Yep, they can kind of blend and overlap a little, but for sure the waiver services are there because the person's qualified for, a facility level of care and they're getting that care in the community and it's ongoing care. We know the person experiences the disability. They've met that level of care. They're receiving that through the waiver, and if they need care that's to a higher level of that, they get it from a different professional, like a rehabilitation therapist or behavioral therapist or something like that. Somebody like that. Okay. What are your other questions about this topic? I got down to that one and that was the last one I saw. What other questions are there? Did I get to all or most of the questions that needed to be answered in this presentation? I may have gotten to most of them. I'm just checking them out and making sure. Um, okay, a reminder to say that the service is not used for medical appointments. Yes, you are correct. Habilitation is not used to bring a person to medical appointments. If someone receives 20 hours habilitation in a current plan and renews in February, usually you could use an Appendix K, as is there no change of service, but due to these DAHAB regs, a support plan is needed. An Appendix K, I think if I understand it right, and there may be details that I'm not getting from the way, from what you wrote, you can use an Appendix K to renew a plan that renews before, I think February 2nd is what it said in our last e-alert. As long as there's no changes in the service the person is requesting. So just because the reg changed doesn't mean they need to use a different form. It means that the requests for services will be evaluated under new regs. That's all. And they're not very different. They just give more definition around the purpose and the outcome and the measurement pieces. And then it clearly defines the requests for over the limit have to look a certain way, and we have certain evidence around that. Okay. Question says, if an individual is in therapeutic foster care with paid services through Medicaid, can they also receive waiver services? For example, community access services through therapeutic foster program. Can they also receive DAHAB, or is that duplication? Therapeutic foster care. I'd have to know a little bit more about that. If you're talking about behavioral health or the service that like young people get through OCS, a foster program, best thought is that if they also have a waiver, they could, but the amount requested would have to make sense because they'd be getting therapeutic supports also through their home. Okay. Each support plan renewal requires supporting documentation to continue units greater than the cap. Yes. So if someone now has 20 hours per week of DAHAB and they renew in January, we can do a second K. Without knowing specifics on that, as long as they renew before, I have to go back to the e-alert because I'm just thinking about this particularly. But as long as it's as long as they renew before the date after which we don't accept the Appendix K anymore, they could. They are going to be evaluated on the 1st of January and thereon under the new regs. So you would have to prepare this kind of documentation around that. Question says, I don't see any of our care coordinators in this training. I hope they'll be participating in another training because they're the ones responsible for requesting additional DAHAB in the support plan, obtaining the additional documentation, and writing the plan to support the request. Yes, and the team is responsible too. There's a planning team process there, so I can't speak to every single individual story, but yes, they're responsible and they gather the team and they put it together and they know this regulation, and they put together those requests for people who need them for the reasons we've stated. Supporting documentation is required to continue units greater than the cap. Yes. And there are lots of care coordinators here. I get it. We do have a list. You can see the list of participants. I'm not sure what, I don't know who belongs to who when somebody says our, okay? But welcome to you, care coordinators. There might be certain ones the person was looking for. I really don't know, but it's all good. We're glad you're here. If you're a care coordinator, if you're not a care coordinator, we're very glad that you're here, and thank you for that. Other questions? I looked back at my original list and I didn't see any that didn't have at least a theme here that we've been talking about today. Comments, thoughts, concerns, anything? Okay, this one is a long one. Let me think about it. Okay, it's a question about the form to use. I thought a full plan was required if there was more than 624 requested. Can SDS provide clarification on DAHAB as it relates to Appendix K? If more than the regulatory limit was approved, can the Appendix K short form be used to request the same amount for the next year after the 12/31 regulations change? Effective January 1, 2021, SDS will be applying the new DAHAB regulations. Requests received after that date will be reviewed using the new regs. After December 31st, all requests for DAHAB beyond the approved reg amount will need to be submitted using the regular forms. Okay, so that was on the e-alert. So, okay, you need to use the regular forms for DAHAB beyond the approved regulatory amount after December 31st. Okay, so that helps. Thank you. I would have to go back out to that e-alert to find that too. So yes, all the questions about the Appendix K and things like that. Okay, so I was half right. It said you had to have the documentation, but you also need to use the regular plan form. Other thoughts and concerns? And you can always email us if you're like me. I think of something later that I wanted to ask and I didn't get a chance to ask it, or I just didn't think of it right then and there. And if you have questions in the future, you can send them to our email, sdstraining@alaska.gov. The original proposal mentioned services would be provided to increase functioning to the level comparable to the peers. Was that dropped? Yes, it was dropped. It was pretty confusing because we serve people who we know are different than peers of the same age. So the intent of that was to help a person get as close to that as possible. But it was confusing because it made it look like the expectation was the person was gonna, rise to that level, which isn't really gonna be part of everybody's life. I mean, for anybody. I mean, my peers do things that I want to do, and I won't get there. Same thing for people we serve. They're going to need help for everyday life and for social interaction and all these things. It's like peers do, and it's also related to age appropriate. Having services that are appropriate to the person's age and doing things in those services that are appropriate to the person's age. It's kind of a pitfall of it's a pitfall of services where, you know, the only thing available or the only thing we don't seek beyond what like a younger person would do for a, a full-on adult's day had, you know. So, I get that sometimes people want to do things that are like a younger, much younger person would do, but we do need to consider and have age appropriate services and direct delivery of those services for our adults and children that we serve that go the other way too. Mhm. Other thoughts, concerns? Thank you for your questions. A few of us, if we have a question that's a little bit off topic, like sort of, kind of, I'm happy to answer it outside of the webinar. And it's hard to stick to one thing, I know, because everything's kind of like a web, all the services we do and we help people work their lives and things like that. It kind of all goes together. Um, and some of the questions are related to the documentation and things like that. hmm I think that probably one of the best things that you could do if you have questions about documenting and multiple services that you're authorized to provide, and they're all HAB services, especially if there's a residential one that you're as a provider delivering, then you should come to our HAB goals webinar if you can. We can kind of mash those things out there. We can unpack them. So there's nothing that says we have to go until 3, right? It's not mandatory. We're well past halfway mark, I think. Are we approaching a halfway mark? Or yeah, we're well past it. Sorry, looking at my clock. Um, those of us who are care coordinators, actually everyone here today, you will get an email that says that go here to download a certificate of attendance. And the certificate of attendance will say care coordinator CEH continuing education hours on it. If you are not a care coordinator, that's a certificate for you. It just says that on it. If you are a care coordinator, you want to keep that and add it to your pile of, trainings that you're going to put forth for continuing education hours for your certification. We get a lot of questions about the shortened form Appendix K and the support plan. Again, the Appendix K is a brand new thing in our world. I think that we like it because it's shorter. I wouldn't want it to make it so that people were not given choices about services. And I just get the sense of a lot of wanting to hold on to that plan. But I guess my best thought is to just prepare to be writing full support plans at some point in the near future. And that's how we used to do. And, we just hopefully giving these guidelines and these regulations and, your access to training can help you create a great plan is what I'm trying to say. If a person didn't register with an email address, they're not going to get the certificate. Okay, it comes right from the system. So an email address tells the system to send that email with the certificate attached. Question says, would be institutionalized within the next 30 days. Yeah, it's true. It's within the next plan year. So yes, plan year, not 30 days. Due date or start date for March 10th, 2021 for Appendix K support plan and for level of care renewals. I think what I want to do is collect the questions about those things and respond directly to you. I want to get the e-alerts and things like that to help explain those things. So you can send a separate email. All the requirements have been sent out by e-alert. So it's not like there's anything secret that, that people wouldn't know. I just have to go back to them to say, hey, this is how it was said, just to make sure I say the right thing. Hard part is having a team meeting in a way that works out and COVID is safe with the wide variety of technical skills out there. I actually love writing plans, but COVID changes the game. Yes, it does. It does. For everyone. Does the agency need the certificate for this training? For certification with day habilitation? Only a care coordinator. Actually, there's two ways that you might use this training certificate. For a care coordinator to be recertified with senior and disability services, you would definitely need that, okay? For those of us who are working in licensed assisted living homes, you could use it as part of your admin training, or if you were a worker in the home, you could use it as part of your worker training. It's going to say care coordinator CEH on it, but don't worry, it still has the title of the training and it has the hours. So I'm guessing it would be okay to use it for assisted living licensing training. I'm guessing that that's okay. Other thoughts and questions?
Karen, they can use it. That is true for the ones with assisted living homes. They can
Okay,
use this training as a part of their certification that they need to get.
cool. Thank
And
you.
as well, if any of them up here are CNAs or anything like that, they can use this training as well.
Mhm. Now, when you get the email, it won't have an attachment. It'll have a link and it'll say, click here to download, okay? If you go to that link and you can't download anything, you might try opening a different browser in your computer, like a different, if you use, Internet Explorer, try Firefox or something else, right? You might try that. I haven't heard of people having problems with that super recently at all. So I think it's probably a non-issue, but just know that it's a link, it's not an attachment. Other thoughts, comments, questions? Not getting a whole lot. It's coming up on 2:30 here, so that's okay. It's okay if we're finished. because as you know, the conversation doesn't stop. We'll have our FAQs hopefully posted and a video posted so people can access it later. And we're always here for you, our training team, and myself to help answer your questions, you know, as time goes on and you're working through these requests. And even if you need to have a little bit of help with thinking about a particular case and you've got questions, you know, about how DayHab fits and what it does or doesn't do, or duplication or whatever, we are fine with helping with that. If you have protected health information, you need to email our DSM. But if you can kind of leave all that out and give us case scenarios without names and information like that, you could use our regular email. I'm encouraging email right now because we are working remotely and it's really difficult to get the phone calls. If you need a phone call, just email us and ask for a good time. Shoot us a few times that you are available and we'll make an appointment for a phone call or a Zoom. We love to do that. Okay. So it looks like we're good. It looks like we're pretty much done. I will go ahead and close our session. Thank you for coming here today and for your wonderful questions and the success stories. And I'm really hoping that we were able to unpack regulations, and we've all learned. I certainly have learned from you. And so I appreciate that very much. And thank you very much for the work that you do serving people who receive DayHab and other waiver services. So I'll go ahead and close my webcam. So goodbye for now. And I'll close the session in just a minute or so, but you are welcome to go ahead and click out whenever you're comfortable.